That's not.
Over here? No, but we can take the extension cord and plug it in on that side.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a good spot, right?
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Livingston Planning Board meeting. You want to take the roll, Jack, and read the open public meetings? We do or we don't?
I do,
Okay, I'll give you a minute.
yes. All right, this is a meeting of Livingston's Planning Board, and notice of this meeting. Notice of this meeting has been published in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Law. For members of the public who are here, please be informed that this meeting is video recorded. And we'll just hold a minute, Mr. Chairman, so our court reporter can get set up.
Absolutely, Jack, no problem. All right, you want to start over, Jack? Let's get the open public readings on the record, just in case. Are you ready? Yes. All right, she's going to do the open public meetings reading again, so you can take it down so it's in the record.
All right, good evening, everyone. It's Tuesday, April 4th, 2023. This is a regular meeting of Livingston Planning Board, and notice of this meeting has been published in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Law. Please note, for members of the public who are joining this meeting meeting is being video recorded.
Thank you very much. You want to call the first case, Jack?
Let's call the roll. Mr. Klein?
Here.
Mr. Ratner? Here. Mr. Reber is recused from hearing this application. Mr. Diner? Yes. Mr. Lewis?
Here.
Ms. Cucci? Here. Ms. Begoli? Here. Ms. Wishnu? Here. Mrs. Santola?
Here.
Mr. Fernandez is not present this evening. We do have our board attorney, our assistant township engineer, our traffic consultant, and our planning consultant. Catherine Madry from our planning department is also here this evening. We have our roll.
Thank you very much, and for the purposes of tonight's hearing, Ms. Wishner will be sitting in for Mr. Reber. You want to call the first case, Jack?
That application scheduled for this evening is preliminary and final site plan with variances for 389-405 East Mount Pleasant Avenue, Block 2100, lots 22, through 25, 35.01, 35.02, and 35.03, located in the RIAO zone. Application number 2022-65-PFSPV, Mount Pleasant Partners, LLC.
Thank you very much. Before we turn it over to Mr. Flannery, just a quick explanation of how the process is going to work this evening. The applicant puts on its case, and it does so one witness at a time. After each witness, the board and its professionals will have an opportunity to ask questions of that witness, and then we'll turn it over to the public. And if anyone's here from the public that has questions, they can ask questions of that witness about the testimony that witness just gave. No statements, and if that witness happens to be an architect, please don't ask questions about traffic, because we'll probably have a witness about that later. After we're all done, anyone from the public who would like to make a public statement has the right to come to the microphone, be sworn in, and make a public statement or present any evidence that you might think important, photos, whatever. But that, again, is at the end after the applicant makes its full case. So in the beginning, we're going to ask questions of each witness, questions only, and then we're going to have statements at the end. So we'll remind everybody if they don't follow the rules precisely, but they've been working for 75 or 80 years now, so we're going to stick with them. Having said that, Mr. Flannery, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Peter Flannery with the law firm of Bisgayer Hoff on behalf of the applicant, Mount Pleasant Partners, LLC. Proper legal notice was provided for this hearing, and I ask that the board take jurisdiction of this application.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, received.
Notice is good, thank you.
Thank you very much. This application is for property located at Block 2100, lots 22 through 25, lots 35.01 through 35.03, also known as 389-405 Mount Pleasant Avenue. It's about 16.5 acres in area, fronting on not only East Mount Pleasant Avenue, but also Forest Hill Road to the west. It's in the RIAO Inclusionary Adult Residential Overlay District. Applicant is proposing a 254-unit active adult, 55 and over, residential community. It's an inclusionary development, includes 51 senior affordable housing units. It also includes clubhouse, pool, and various amenities and site improvements. This project, of course, goes toward meeting the township's affordable housing obligation, providing much-needed affordable housing to residents of Livingston and the general region. I have 4 witnesses tonight that I intend on presenting. Mr. Michael Anzafama, Casey and Keller, who's our civil engineer, as well as our planner. Brian Conway, also of Casey and Keller, who's our landscape architect. Lawrence Appel, our architect, and Gary Dean, who's our traffic engineer. Without further ado, I'd like to bring up our first witness, Mr. Michael Anzafama, our civil engineer and planner.
You want to swear the witness?
I do. My name is Michael Lanzafama, that's L-A-N-Z-A-F-A-M-A, and I'm a licensed professional engineer, land surveyor and planner, licensed in the state of New Jersey. I'm a principal with the firm of Casey and Keller Incorporated, 258 Main Street, Millburn, New Jersey. I've testified before this board in similar applications on numerous occasions, and my licenses are all current and in good standing.
Thank you.
We'll accept Mr. Alonso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lanzafama, if you could just briefly provide an overview of the existing conditions on the property as well as the proposed development.
Certainly. What we're bringing up on the screen is the cover sheet of the plan set that was submitted as part of the application. And what I'd like to do is utilize the aerial photography exhibit that is part of that drawing to give you a good understanding of where the property is and what it currently consists of. As you heard from the attorney, that the property in question is Block 2100, lots 22 through 25, and lots 35.01 through lot 35.03. It is located in the RIA zone, which is an inclusionary adult residential overlay district, and has a total land area of 16.47 acres. The property is located on the north side of East Mount Pleasant Avenue, which runs along the left side of the exhibit that you see. To our west is Force Hill Road, which runs along the top of the exhibit. And as you can see from the exhibit, that the area immediately to the west is the Brandywine facility that was recently constructed, maybe about 8 or 10 years ago. And the adjoining properties immediately to the west are residential single-family homes. To the north are single-family residential homes in Bel Air Woods, and there are additional single-family residential construction that exists on the far side of East Mount Pleasant Avenue. Immediately to the east of the site is Nance Road, which is in the township of West Orange, and these are all single-family homes that exist along our eastern boundary. The property is somewhat irregular in shape, as you can see from the exhibit. It has 479 feet of frontage along East Mount Pleasant Avenue, and the property extends to the north, and you can see that it has over 500 feet of frontage along Force Hill Road. On the northern boundary of the site is a tributary of the Canoe Brook, and you can see that there is a vast amount of wooded area that exists in the northeast corner of the site. This area is classified as wetlands, so approximately 30% of the site, or 4.88 acres of the site, are impacted by freshwater wetlands. We've received a letter of interpretation from the DEP confirming the location and the quality of the wetlands. So the wetlands also have what's referred to as a wetland buffer of 50 feet. Our entire project will be developed outside of not only the wetland area, but the wetland buffer as well. So we don't need any additional permitting from the New Jersey DEP to develop the site, because we'll have no impact on the wetlands or the wetland buffer. As you can see from the exhibit...
Mr. Lonzafama, just real quickly, could you just show us on the screen where the wetland buffer is? Like, what are the existing
Why don't we go
terrain is
to...
going to stay the same?
I'll bring up the survey, which is sheet 3 in your plan set. Squeeze that down a bit. Down a bit. Let that focus in. And you can see that the wetland line runs diagonally from the western property line to the north, and then up along the tributary of Canoe Brook, which runs along this common boundary line between us and the properties to the north. The 50-foot riparian buffer, wetland buffer, runs along that line. You can see the lighter line that exists in that area. On this exhibit, you could see the little hatched areas that you see here. These are areas of steep slopes. They're not natural steep slopes. These were steep slopes created as part of the prior developments on the site. You can see that there's a 5-bedroom single-family home that's constructed and set far back from East Mount Pleasant Avenue with an extensive driveway, parking court, and access to the garages. There are tennis courts at the rear, and there's a variety of walkways and plantings. There's also a three-bedroom, single-family home constructed much closer to East Mount Pleasant Avenue. And finally, there's the, I think it's the Full Gospel Hall that exists in the western portion of the site, or excuse me, eastern portion of the site. This is the church, and then they had a parking area immediately to the north. This parking area drained into an existing stormwater management basin that then discharged to a swale that runs through the wetlands and discharges into the brook along the northern boundary line.
So everything to the east of the wetland buffer line is untouched?
The area to the east of the wetland is this area through here. This area is heavily wooded and will remain undisturbed as part of this development. The existing structures total about 2.32% of the site, or about 16,660 square feet. The overall impervious coverage that currently exists on the site is approximately 89,163 square feet, or about 12.4% of the site area. Utilities are readily available from both East Mount Pleasant Avenue as well as Forest Hill Road. There's sanitary sewer available on East Mount Pleasant Avenue. Water, gas, electric are all available from both streets. East Mount Pleasant Avenue is also a state highway Route 10. So as part of our application, we will be securing a DOT access permit as part of the overall approval process and overall review. As you can see, site access currently is from several driveways along East Mount Pleasant Avenue. There's currently no access off of Forest Hill Road. If you recall, this area of Forest Hill Road are lots 35.01 excuse me, to 35.03, which was part of a subdivision to construct 3 single-family homes. The owner of that property began his site work. He started to clear the area, but never built the homes. And then he decided to sell the property to the current applicant of this project. The topography of the site, as you can see, it slopes moderately from Route 10, East Mount Pleasant Avenue, to the north, and drains to a low point where there's a culvert under Forest Hill Road that allows Canoe Brook to pass under Forest Hill Road. The overall grade differential from the high point at the southeast corner of the site to the northwest corner of the site is about 55 feet overall. As you can see, we've located a number of trees on the site. We've located over 1,700 trees on the property, and about 60% of those are trees smaller than 10 inches in caliber. So it's not a heavily wooded, mature wooded area that will be disturbed. The areas around the homes and the area between the church and the single-family homes, these are secondary growth and not substantial. The areas that are more native woodlands are the areas of the wetlands, and as I said earlier, that area would not be disturbed. Let me just close that and bring up. I'd like to use as an exhibit, we took the liberty of colorizing the overall site plan. This is a colorized version of sheet number 5 in your plan set. And as you can see,
I think we're going to mark this exhibit A1.
A1. And this is a colorized version of sheet number 5, the overall site plan. What the project proposes is the construction of 254 rental units in 3 separate buildings. Building 1 is located parallel to East Mount Pleasant Avenue on the far southern end of the site. Building 2 would be the central building, and Building 3, along with the clubhouse, is located in the northern end of the project, closer to Forest Hill Road. The 254 units would yield a density of 15.42 dwelling units per acre, where 16 dwelling units per acre is permitted under the ordinance. All of the buildings will be 3-story structures over a parking garage, and there would be elevator service in every building. The height of the buildings is measured from the first living level to the midpoint of the sloping roof, and the allowable is 40 feet, and we're at 39.58 feet, so we're well in compliance with the ordinance. The breakdown of the buildings, there will be 203 market rate units and 51 affordable units. In building number 1, blow that up. No, too much. Very sensitive. There we go. There we go. So in building number 1, we're proposed to have there would be 54 units proposed in building number 1, and within the parking garage, there would be parking available for 77 spaces. And this would consist of 11 standard 9x18 spaces, 6 of which would be EV ready, EV charging stations would be provided, 64 tandem spaces, which would be assigned to specific 2-bedroom units, and 2 handicap accessible spaces. In building number 2, there would be a total of 110 dwelling units in the building. The parking area within the building, the parking garage itself within the building, would break down into 167 available parking spaces. There would be 69 standard 9x18 spaces, again, 6 of which would be EV ready. There would be 94 tandem spaces, which again would be assigned to 2-bedroom units. And there would be 4 handicap accessible spaces. And you can see from this blow-up of these areas, there's a primary access in and out of building number 1 in its northwest corner. That is directly accessed off of a surface parking area, so there's one way in and one way out on that building. On building 2, however, we come into a central area of the building that comes in off of the boulevard driveway that allows access from Route 10 and allows you to circulate through the garage and exit out at the northern end into another surface parking area that brings you back out to the boulevard area.
So just on the dual spots, how many sets of dual parking spots are there?
There, in building number
building
1,
two.
in building number 1, we have 64 tandem spaces, so it's 32 groups. On building number 2, we have 94, so that's 47 groups. And on, I didn't get to building 3 yet, but building 3,
I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had the
Building 3 has 90 dwelling units in it, and the parking that's available in Building 3 is 135 spaces. 54 are standard 9x18 spaces. Again, 6 more EV charging stations in this building. 78 tandem spaces, And there'll be also 3 handicap spaces proposed within the garage. Within the surface parking area, you can see that there's a number of little areas that provide for parking for visitors throughout the project. There are a number of little parking courts, if you will, that are all fed off of the boulevard entrance coming into the site. The parking court that exists between Building 1 and Building 2 also has a cul-de-sac arrangement at the far end to allow for vehicles to come in and safely maneuver around the cul-de-sac. And what that allows us to do is on Building Number 1, we have a refuse area located at that far end of the building. The vehicle, the truck would come in, he could utilize this area to back into position, collect the refuse, and then exit via the cul-de-sac. This would also provide for a little cutout by the 2 lobbies. There's a lobby on the lower level for Building Number 1 and an upper lobby on Building Number 2. So vehicles can park in this little cutout, such as UPS deliveries, Amazon delivery trucks, and they can come in and do their quick drop-off to the building. Move-ins.
Where's the access from the cutout?
I'm sorry.
The access from the cutout, the access to the building from the Amazon cars parking
Oh,
spot.
there's a lobby on the lower level here, and this is the
I don't think
building
we
number
can see
1.
the
Cursor, nicer,
What's the matter?
the cursor to show. Right, thank you.
That better?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's the lobby on building number 1. The cutout is located here, so the vehicle could pull up, come into the lobby, drop off packages to the mailroom, and then come around and exit via the cul-de-sac. If they wanted to deliver to building number 2, there's an upper lobby that they can gain access through the door located here, and they would then come into the building and do the drop-off to the mailroom at that level.
So there's a mail/package room in each building?
Yes, there's one located in each lobby.
Let's just go back to the tandem spots real quickly. So how many tandem sets are there versus how many 2 bedrooms are there? So
Right.
in other words, are there some 2 bedrooms that don't have tandem parking or not?
Yeah, there's enough there's enough 2-bedroom units to support the tandem spaces in each of the buildings.
But is every 2-bedroom unit going to have a tandem setup, or will there be some extras?
Not everyone, no. But it'll be very close. Let me see if I have that. I don't have that broken down right in front of me, but I did check that when I was preparing for the hearing, and I noticed that there were more 2-bedroom apartments in each building than tandem arrangements. And I can say that for each building, 1, 2, and 3. But maybe Larry can help me out with some of the breakdowns a little later.
Mr. Lanzafama, while you're dealing with that, and before we get off that topic, if you, I'm sorry. Before we get off that topic, so if a third of the 2-bedroom units only have 1 car, and half of the 1-bedroom units have 2 cars, how do you deal with that, with the number of parking spaces that you need? You're showing all of the number of parking spaces that you require based
Right.
on the RSIS, although there's no control with regard to tandem at this point. What do you do?
Well, the number of parking spaces we have are actually much more than what is required under both the RSIS and the ordinance. The ordinance requires 1.6 spaces per dwelling unit. So what we have are actually 501 spaces overall. So we have quite a few more cars than are required under the ordinance. We will be able to control how tenants park. In other words, there is enough parking to support nearly 2 cars per every apartment. We have 254 apartments proposed, and we have about 501 spaces.
How many,
proposed.
how many spaces do you have allocated for visitors?
Well, it's built into the ordinance. Under the RSIS, a half a car per unit is allocated for
I want to
visitors.
see a half a car, by the way.
So that comes out to about 127 cars.
So you have 127 spaces that are allocated for visitors?
Well, they're available to visitors.
Well, can they get into the garage without any problems?
Certain garages, they will be able to. The way we have it set up is the surface parking areas would accommodate approximately 113 parking spaces. 122 parking spaces. There would be 113 spots, standard spots, 6 EV stations, and 9 handicap accessible spots. So some additional spaces will be allocated in close proximity to the entrances to the garages so that visitors could pull into the garage and utilize some of those spaces. So the way it's set up and the way the parking is distributed, it can easily support the scenario that you had suggested, that what if a 2-bedroom only has 1 and 1-bedroom has 2? So we do have enough parking between the garages and the surface parking to support that scenario.
Are the 1-bedrooms going to be assigned parking or just the 2-bedroom that are tandem?
Right now, we just thought about the 2 bedrooms. We haven't, but that might be a way to control things, is to assign them to each apartment, but we haven't made that
Are
determination.
any of the other spaces underneath the parking garage controlled, or are they all open, so once you get into the garage, you can go anywhere?
Most of the garages are. I believe we had looked at garage number 3 and building number 3 to allocate a small area there for some visitor parking. But the building 1 and building 2, I believe, are secured so that only a tenant can get into those areas.
So other than the surface parking out in front of building number 1, there is no visitor parking assigned for building number 1?
There's
Or 2?
There's visitor parking throughout. There's between buildings 1 and 2. There's a parking courtyard outside in front of building 2. And then there's a parking courtyard between building 2 and the clubhouse. Generate. And then there's additional parking that's available to the visitors around building 3. And we had thought about making some of the spaces that are located in close proximity to the entrance available to the general public.
So how many visitor parkings are you saying that you have?
I'm sorry, say that
How
again?
many total visitor parking spots?
We're required to have a total of 127, but they're factored into the overall design. They're not specified as a visitor spot. Now, the only area where we did make some special consideration is along the clubhouse. The 13 spots that are located along the clubhouse are signed for 2-hour parking maximum. So we figured there'd be a little events at the clubhouse, we'd want to be able to move those vehicles in and out of those spaces in a reasonable way.
So the surface spots, you need 127, I think you had 122 surface spots
Correct.
unreserved. And that's where the 5 potentially having to be in building 3 comes from?
That's correct.
So, but does that then render the entire garage of building 3 not restricted access? Or are you going to design it in such a way that the gate is
No,
just
what-
beyond
what
those
we've
5
done-
spots?
What we've done on other applications and on other similar projects is we cordoned off only a section of the parking lot so that there would be a fob-operated gate internal
Beyond the
internal
5
to the
spots or
garage,
something, okay.
not at the door.
Gotcha. I just said, so that there would be, the gate would be beyond the 5 publicly accessible spots, not at the gate to the garage.
I'm having trouble hearing you, Barry.
The security gate would be after the 5 spots that are indoors.
That is correct.
Do the affordables park outside, or?
Say that again, Steve.
The affordable homes park outside or inside?
They'll park either location.
So in other words, the plan right now, you can see everyone's concerned about the parking. The plan right now is that 2 of the buildings will have some sort of internal gate or fob. And other than the tandems, which will be assigned to 2 bedrooms, it'll be,
Thank you.
once you're inside, you can park wherever you want, whether you live in an affordable unit or a market rate.
That's correct. So just to recap what we were talking about, is that under your ordinance, you're required to have 1.6 spaces per dwelling. Remember, this is adult housing, so the parking demand isn't your typical multifamily housing parking demand. So that calculates out to be 406 spaces. We get a 24-car credit for the EV charging stations, because we're installing 24 charging stations initially, 6 in each building and 6 in the surface parking areas. So that comes out to 382 parking spaces required. We have 501 spaces proposed between the 3 garages and the surface parking areas. So we're well in excess of what the demand would be. And even if you look at the residential parking standards, as if it were a standard multifamily development, that would be 489 spaces required. With the 24-car credit for EV, that's only 465 spaces, and again, we have 501. So, we were as much concerned about having adequate parking as you all are. And I think the way we've developed the site, I think we've addressed that question. And if it's a matter of figuring out how we assign them, whether it's, obviously, we're landlords, we'll be able to control the leases and be able to assess what the tenant's demands are. And maybe we have to move some things around. Maybe if there's a situation where we know that there's a 2-bedroom unit that is only gonna have 1 car, and a single-bedroom unit that has 2 cars, maybe we can reassign that, give the 2 cars the tandem spot. We'll have to control that. We'll be able to control that. We're there all the time. It's not like we're going to sell these units and then we leave it as a free-for-all for the tenants to figure out.
This may not be for you, but is the intent to limit the number of spaces in the leases so that a 1-bedroom doesn't have 3 cars, or do you know, or it may not be for you, as I said?
I don't know if that's the intent, but it
Okay.
can be done to make sure that we do have adequate parking.
Mark, can you explain how this is gonna work individually in the building? It doesn't seem to add up. You take building 1, you have 77 spaces, correct?
Correct,
And 54 units.
correct.
You have 64 tandem spaces, which will service 32 apartments, is that correct?
Well, up to 32 apartments. I think we have,
Well, how can you assign tandem spaces to 2 different apartments? Wouldn't they have to be to the same apartment?
yeah, it would be the same apartment. Yeah, it would
So
be a
that would-
2-bedroom apartment.
That would cover 32 of the 54 apartments,
Right,
correct?
and
And
I
that
don't
leaves
have the
you-
numbers of, maybe Larry can help me out. We
Well,
have
I'm using-
34
I
in
mean-
Building 1, 34 2-bedrooms in Building 1? I'm asking for
All
help.
right, but it still leaves you 22 apartments that need parking, correct?
Correct,
And you only have 13 additional spaces.
that's correct.
So how's that going to work? Not everyone will
But
be
you have
able...
surface parking as well.
So not
you have-
everyone will be able to park in the garage.
That's correct. And it's not required that everyone
No,
has to
but-
park in
and
the garage.
that's going to be the same situation for the other 2 buildings.
Exactly, exactly. That's why when we talked about visitor spots, that's why I made the statement that the surface parking is not as allocated only to visitors.
Yeah, but that's concerning, because I'm afraid that because of that, now the extra traffic, the extra visitors will land on the street parking, which will
No,
create another problem.
That's not gonna happen.
How?
Because you have 501 spaces available, where the demand, under your ordinance is only 382. So you have 120 cars more than is anticipated by ordinance and by studies. These are adult housing, which tend to have less parking, and you'll hear from our traffic consultant who will explain that. So remember, there is adequate parking to support all of the apartments we're proposing. And there's enough parking in close proximity to each building to support the number of apartments in each building. Yes, Richard?
How does the RSIS deal with tandem spaces? Do they just count those as regular spaces? And so that if you've got 60 or 70 tandem spaces, that's 140 parking spaces?
Yes.
Even though if someone is in one, they can't get into the one in the back if it's blocked?
Yeah, typically, the way this originated in RSIS is if we were doing a townhouse, for example, and I had a one-car garage, and I had a driveway in front of the garage, it counts as 2 spaces. And that's a tandem arrangement.
Right, but if you're talking about a townhouse in a condominium setting or in an apartment setting?
Either
Very
one.
different.
Either one.
Well, in a condominium, it's owned by the people that live there.
Right.
In an apartment, it's free-for-all for whoever's going in.
No.
I think there's
no,
some
it's not.
confusion.
Unless you say you're assigning only the
There is
tandem
some
spaces.
confusion right now, which we ought to focus on. Our responsibility is to determine whether or not the required number of parking spaces is being provided in accordance with the code. There are issues as to how the building owner manages those spaces. Over the years, I've been to a number of facilities where there are tandem parking arrangements. They've all been where both spaces are assigned to a particular tenant.
Correct.
They decide which of their cars is going into which of the 2 spaces. And the issue that has to be faced by us is whether or not there is enough maneuvering space within the garage for the cars to get in and out of spaces, whether they're tandem or singular.
Correct.
So let's focus on those things that we have to do. And I think also that your architect should be able to talk about the arrangement of the parking spaces as well, and the security of the garage, including where any gates would be as compared to space for tenants and space for visitors.
Yes, and we'll have that testimony from our architect later.
Yeah, so just to respond to Mr. Diner's question, the tandem arrangement has been used for years, and RSIS acknowledges it. My own house, I have a one-car garage. My wife gets the garage, I get the driveway, and we work that out. And it's the same thing, if you're a tenant and you're assigned those 2 spots, you and your wife or whoever your co-tenant is are going to work that out. You're going to manage that. And the landlord's going to make sure that the tenants adhere to what they are required to do under their lease. So I'm not concerned about it. I think it works. And we've proposed this in a number of different projects, although they haven't all been built yet, but it does work. So moving on, so Mel, to answer Mr. Klein's question, and I think I've stated it, we have about 120 cars more than what the ordinance requires. So we're well in excess of what's required. We've included EV charging stations, as I said, 24, 6 in each building, 6 in the surface lot. We have adequate handicap parking available, and we have adequate loading and unloading areas for each of the buildings. Just going through some of the bulk standards, I just wanted to make sure that you were aware that the proposal is fully compliant with the ordinance with regard to setbacks, with regard to building height, building coverage, density, and overall lot coverage. The required setback from East Mount Pleasant Avenue, for example, is 70 feet, and that's for building number 1. That's what we have, 70 feet. The setback to The two adjoining side properties and residential uses is 75 feet, which again, we comply with. The separation between building 1 and 2, there's a whole series of setback requirements for whether or not the building is side to side, front to rear, front to side. So again, in this particular case, building 1 and 2 should be separated by a minimum of 60 feet. We're at 86.12 feet. Building 2 and the building 3, which is the clubhouse, is the closest point, is at 57.86 feet, where 50 feet is required. What I also like to point out is the configuration or the orientation of the buildings. What we attempted to do, which we didn't attempt to do, I think we accomplished it quite nicely, was to orient the buildings in such a way so that we could kind of control the mass as it appears from adjoining properties and from the street. As you can see, the orientation of building 3 is a bit cocked as you appear along Forest Hill Road, which runs up along the top. And it's set back well in excess of the setback requirement along Forest Hill Road, which is 45 feet, and we're at nearly 75 feet along that stretch of the roadway. And you can see the articulation in the facade of the building also sets it back much further from the roadway, so that even though it's 3 stories in height, much of the mass of the building is pushed closer to the wetland areas, so that you don't see a massive structure. You see it broken up. As I said earlier, the density is compliant at 15.42 dwelling units per acre, where 16 are required. We're limited to a maximum of 125 dwelling units in each building. We have, the most would be 110. The number of buildings, we need to have 2 minimum and 6 maximum under the ordinance. We're proposing 3. The building height is compliant at 39.58 feet, where 42 feet is permitted under the ordinance. Building coverage is allowed to be 30%. We're at 22.7% of the site, again, well in compliance with the ordinance. The overall lot coverage is permitted to be 45%, and we are at 36.49%, again, well in compliance. So the overall site plan also provides for amenities throughout the site. We have a clubhouse that you can see is attached to building 3 and located at the cul-de-sac of the boulevard entrance. There's proposed pool and patio. We have a top lot because we know how grandparents love to take the little ones to the playground when they visit. And there are amenity decks on buildings 2 and 3 that would allow for tenants to come out, sit, and relax as part of the overall amenity space. Larry will talk about the amenities within the building, but there's also allocation in the clubhouse for fitness and et cetera, and meeting rooms. Let me go to...
Building 3 is attached to the clubhouse, like its own reason, you don't permit it to be building?
Mr. Santola, I couldn't quite hear that.
Is there a reason the clubhouse is attached to building 3?
Yes, this allows for entrance. You come into the clubhouse, and this is like an entry lobby, and then you have a hallway that connects you to the building. So this is like an entry foyer, if you would, into the building 3. So it was the way it was set up architecturally. There's also a secondary lobby at the lower level. Remember, the garages is about 14 feet from the garage level to the first living level. So you have access points at the different elevations. So the entrance here brings you up to the first living level. The lobby down below here is down at the garage level. And as I said, there's a number of elevator banks throughout the garage to allow for easy access up from the garage into the apartment space. Let me open up. Which one did I just wanted to go through and, let's see, what's this one? What this represents, this is a truck turning analysis we did at the request of Chief Mullen to demonstrate that the Livingston fire truck can negotiate the boulevard. What we had neglected to do,
Is this going to be Exhibit A2?
this would be Exhibit
Thank you.
A2. It was submitted as part of the set, Peter.
Oh, was it? Even with the coloring?
E2. Even
Okay.
with the coloring.
All right, so,
It was submitted as sheet E1, excuse me.
okay,
And it was blue in the submission, right?
Yeah.
Right,
Okay.
right, so we don't need to mark.
thank you.
So, we did this at the request of the chief and to show him that the fire trucks can maneuver around the cul-de-sac. And we also have part of the design is emergency ingress and egress out to Forest Hill Road. This would be a grass paver access roadway that would allow for emergency vehicles to enter the site should the boulevard for some reason be blocked. We've indicated on this plan, you can see we show a post and chain down at the right-of-way. What we decided to do, I didn't get a chance to update this, is we're putting a more decorative gate that would occur at the jog and the retaining wall so that it's set back from the street. And that would be a more decorative metal gate that would have a Knox box so that the fire department could unlock it and open it up and allow for entrance. You'll see that on the renderings once the architect testifies. But this secondary means of emergency ingress and egress was added at the request of the fire department and was a conversation we had at the track meeting. So we've incorporated that into the plan. The other truck turning analysis we did is E2, which is the garbage truck coming into the site and accessing the loading area by Building 3. You can see that this can easily maneuver through the site as well and make the turn at the cul-de-sac. What we did is question arose, what would happen if a vehicle decided not to use the cul-de-sac to turn around? What would happen if they came down by the entrance to Building 3? How would they make a turn? Well, we've allocated a space here opposite the loading area so that a car or a truck can easily make a K-type turn and exit back out of the site. There are trash rooms located in close proximity to these loading areas so that the garbage trucks can easily access and the maintenance staff can easily bring out the trash to those locations.
Are you going to talk more about how the trash is coming out, or is that going to be architect?
Well, I could talk about that. Let's go back to the overall site plan. Let's start with building number 1. So in building number 1, we've allocated a refuse room at the western end of the building. The trash rooms, there are chutes on every floor. There are going to be trash rooms on every floor. So they'll drop that down, and then the refuse will be assembled in that one room. There'll be a doorway out of that room, and the truck would come in, back into position, load up, and then exit. On building number 2, again, and you can see, like on building 2,
I'm sorry, before you go to building 2, is that also where the move-in, move-outs come from that loading?
you can do it there as well, yes.
So
That is
where
correct.
would, if you're loading from that position, you walk to what? How do you get into the building? How do I get my carriage?
Well, you can Move-in and move-outs can occur at this slot, at the cutout, which would allow access into the building.
Which cutout, I'm sorry.
Use the
The
cursor.
cut,
The cursor's not working.
cutout through here at the main lobby would allow for entrance into the building and use of the elevators.
So you're gonna park a truck in where the pink is?
Yeah,
Load,
well,
unload?
that's a sidewalk, we would park in the gray area right in here. This is large enough to receive a small U-Haul. Remember, these are 1- and 2-bedroom apartments, so you're not seeing a huge Allied van line truck come in. You're looking at smaller U-Haul type trucks to bring in. And even some of those trucks, the smaller trucks, can even fit into these parking spots without a problem. So, yes, the idea is to utilize this cutout, utilize these sidewalk areas. You could bring stuff across into the lobby here, and that would also allow for move-in and move-out for building number 2. You can see we have a trash compactor located in building 1. So once the compactors are full, they then bring them over to the refuse area where they're staged for discharge into the trucks. On building 2,
So the garbage is right next to the lobby, is that what you're saying?
it's behind the lobby. It's behind the lobby, is where the trash room is. It's down in the basement.
And they're gonna have to bring it out at that end.
Yeah, they'll wheel it through the garage,
Right.
into the refuse room, and there's a door here.
They're gonna handle recycle the same way?
Yes. Mhm. Then on building,
Wait, I'm sorry, so the lobby's on the parking level?
this lobby is on the parking
I
lot.
got it.
Coming in here, again, we have a trash compactor in building 2, located centrally in the building. And again, we have the refuse proposed at the far corner of the building. So we have to then get the refuse containers at that location. And what we were anticipating is that the garbage truck could either pull up along the roadway here and fill it up, and then it would utilize the driveway to the garage as a means of making a K-turn to then exit and maneuver back out of the site.
Mike, I'm confused with that one.
Go ahead.
Building 1 is simple, understand. So you're talking about moving the garbage, which is not our problem, it's the building management's problem, from the far side of the parking lot across to where
From here
that pink and green area is?
To here.
And where is a garbage truck going to come in, whether it's a front load or a back load?
He's gonna pull up alongside the driveway here and
Right.
load up.
Okay,
And then he would come around and he would make a K-type turn here and exit the site. That's what we anticipate.
okay.
With regard to building number 3. Come on. Okay, again, the trash compactor is located in the garage level. And then we propose to take it to the north side of the building. There'll be a refuse room here. And what that would allow the truck to do is to come in. He can pull in through here, back into the no parking area, and load the truck. It can then exit.
Pull into the garage?
No. No, he pulls into the loading spot, backs
I
into
got you.
position. The walkway would allow them to bring the refuse out to the
Okay.
truck, and then it makes that right-hand turn and exits the
And is
property.
the loading spot in front of building number 2 as well? Because it didn't seem to be a specific loading area.
No, what we did was, we have the loading area in front of building number 1, directly opposite the
Right.
entrance to building 2.
Got that one, I was in building 2.
No, there's
There is no
nothing
loading
special
area
in
for
the back
building
here.
2.
No.
Okay.
So, moving on to, let's move on to,
Can I ask, Mike, is there like I know there is actually, there's a definition of a loading area in our ordinance, right? Does that meet?
yeah, it has to be 10 by 25 feet, or 10 by 26 feet. They're all compliant,
That's marked as a loading area.
correct.
So do you have, is there a requirement for one for each building?
It doesn't say we have to have one for each building.
But what
But
is-
what we've done is we've created loading spots at key locations for trash removal and for move-ins and move-outs. In some instances, it's a parallel park type spot. In other instances, it's like a tailboard type spot.
So going back to Building 2, which is the largest number of units, I believe, of all of the buildings?
I believe Building 2 is the largest, has 110.
Right. So, and where is the loading then for people moving in and moving out?
They could,
Plus
they would,
garbage?
they could park at the area opposite the lobby level here and come into the building. There should have been a sidewalk here. So they can come across, come into the main lobby, into the elevators and move in.
So if a truck is there and cars are trying to park, including handicap, there is no
There's plenty
loading
of
zone
room.
for that? Or they
There's plenty
park
of room.
across the street in that cutout?
The truck would pull into this spot,
That spot, for Building 1 and 2?
correct. And
Okay.
then they could do the move in and move out. Remember, the landlord, again, can control when and how the move-ins occur. And we also have the loading spot here for the refuse pickup. And as I mentioned earlier, is that many of the types of trucks that are going to be moving in for a one-bedroom apartment are going to be small U-Haul type trucks. And those trucks could probably even fit into some of the parking stalls that are located near the cul-de-sac.
Unless they're
And-
already used by the people that are living there.
Excuse me?
Unless they're used by the people living there.
So just explain, the Building 1 loading spot, is that like a parallel park? I'm
Yes.
confused.
It's
So-
a
and
parallel
that's-
spot.
And that's the main entrance to the building, so the truck's gonna be parallel across the front door?
No.
And people are gonna
there's
carry their
a-
couch
there's-
across the
there's a-
parking lot?
There's a large sidewalk area here.
But that's the entrance to the building.
Well,
It's not
yeah.
really a loading area, it's the front entrance of the building.
Yeah, but it's a sidewalk plaza area. You're gonna be controlling when they move in and move out. You're not talking about a commercial space where you have 9 trucks a day coming in. You're
I'm
not gonna have that.
No, but you
kinda-
figure 45% turnover, right? So you're gonna have 120, call it 100 turnovers a year. That's a truck every 3 days. And both buildings are using a parallel space.
Well, what
Look,
we
it's-
could do.
It's not our problem, but it's clearly not an optimal way to move people in and out of the building.
Well, there is plenty of room down in this area where I'm looking at is between buildings 1 and 2, opposite our storage room, to create a larger loading area that a vehicle could park in and utilize this sidewalk to bring material and furniture into the building. This space could still be utilized for Building 1. So we could certainly make that adjustment.
Well, I would ask you to make the adjustment and give the manager of the building at least a fighting chance to have some options. If the truck's bigger or is gonna be there for a while, you know, you could, to move a 2-bedroom in, it could take 3 hours, 3.5 hours.
And I don't see how the people that are parking across from it will be able to get out. The handicap spot might be blocked, and there's like
No,
3 or 4 additional
nobody's going to be
spaces.
blocked. The vehicle that's parallel parked here does not encroach into the 24-foot wide access aisle whatsoever. Vehicles can back in and out, and these vehicles could back in and out without any interference by the vehicle here. We can certainly put in a loading space down in this area here that would be allocated to building number 2. And we can certainly look at some other arrangement that could be applied, maybe extending this sidewalk and shifting the cul-de-sac, extending the sidewalk around, so a move-in and move-out could utilize this loading spot as well. And they would have to cart the stuff into the.
From a practical standpoint, what everybody is sort of beating at here is that I really think you need to look at this a lot closer before you finalize what you're doing. Besides the move-in, move-out, and in the beginning, you have 254 people. And, you know, landlord can control up to a point, but you got to get the people into the building. And you have the Amazon, and you got the mail, and you have the UPS truck, all doing the same thing at the same time. And
So, but
you
that
need to
that
think
could all
about
be
that
accommodated.
design.
Those could all be accommodated. As I said, we can make some minor adjustments to the plan and easily accommodate all of that.
Good luck.
Thank you. So we're done with the trash and the moving, okay. So, wanted to get to the stormwater management aspect of the project, which I know is of great concern to everyone. There we go. Okay, the overall proposal that we had in mind was to break up the runoff into smaller, more manageable stormwater facilities. Under the new BMP standards, we're limited as to the drainage area that should go to each detention system, and that's about 2.5 acres, and we've accomplished that in this design. On building number 1, we've created a large decorative lawn panel that would exist between Route 10 and the face of the building. The roof water from that building would discharge into this area and be detained. This would be a large lawn panel and could double as rec space for people that might want to walk or come outside for a while. It's a large open lawn panel. This then discharges into a grassed swale that runs along the edge of the cul-de-sac between buildings 1 and 2 and into a second detention facility that is a bioretention basin. A bioretention basin has a 2-foot layer of a mixture of sand and topsoil that allows water to percolate through it. And what that does is it purifies the water column as it passes through that soil. It gets collected by a perforated pipe that is located under that sand and soil mixture and then is discharged to the wetland areas. This basin would not only pick up a portion of the vehicle parking area, but also a good portion of the building itself. The entry drive is a boulevard-type driveway. We have inlets to capture runoff on the west side. On the east side, excuse me, on the west side. On the east side, we have a grass swale, a depressed curb and a grass swale that would intercept the runoff coming off of the roadway and allow it to run overland into a third detention facility that we have in a corner just off the cul-de-sac of the main boulevard entrance. One of the comments in the engineering memo was that perhaps we should put in some inlets along that area, which we can certainly do. Why is this not cooperating here? I can't enlarge it. But we can certainly do that and add that to the plan. We'll be happy to do that. There's a fourth basin located in front of building 2. That again would pick up the roof water as well as the paved surfaces from the parking court in front of building number 2. Stopped on me. There are 2 detention facilities, detention basin 5 and 6, located along Forest Hill Road, that picks up the remainder of the parking area and the roof water from building number 3. Detention basin number 5 is more like a traditional detention basin, in as much as the detention basin number 4 actually purifies the water, and then it discharges or overflows to basin number 5. I don't know what it's doing right now. Oh, there it goes. Okay. No. We could use this exhibit. It's not cooperating. Let me close some of these. There we go. There we go. Okay. So, as I was saying, detention basin 5 is a more conventional basin. This receives runoff, which is first purified in the bioretention basin 4. It then runs into this area. It then discharges to the collection system in Forest Hill Road. Basin number 6 is a bioretention basin that receives runoff from the parking area and the roof water. This also then discharges into the stormwater collection system in Forest Hill Road. The overall design meets the BMP standards with regard to reduction in peak flows, so that the existing condition is reduced by 50% for the 2-year storm, 25% for the 10-year storm, and 20% for the 100-year storm. The 2-year storm, for example, the peak flows from the site are being reduced by 9.11 CFS. For the 10-year storm, 16.24 CFS, and for the 100-year storm, 13.03 CFS. So we clearly meet the regulations with regard to stormwater management. And you can see on this exhibit that the sanitary sewer, because of the topography of the site, is going to be collected at the low point of the site, and a below-grade pump station would be constructed at this location. The force main would then run from the pump station back up through the site, and out into the sanitary sewer on East Mount Pleasant Avenue. Water supply would again be looped from East Mount Pleasant Avenue right through to Forest Hill Road, providing positive pressure for the site. That would give us adequate flow and volume. Each building will have a fire suppression system. There'll be adequate hydrants located on the site. I spoke to Chief Mullen about that. He said he'll review it one more time and make some recommendations with regard to hydrant locations. We'll provide, wherever he thinks is appropriate, hydrants for the site. One thing that we did indicate to him that we would do and did not show on the plan is that the entry driveway, we would post it with no parking signs. He was concerned that if someone should double park there, he'd have a little difficulty getting his fire apparatus through. We told him we would make that adjustment, and I would make that representation to the board here this evening. So that pretty much brings us to the end of the engineering aspects of the project. I do want to point out that the overall project, as I said before, is fully compliant. There is one aspect that there is a bit of a gray area on, and that's within your ordinance with regard to retaining walls in the front yard. I believe it's section 170-91B, paren 2, paren C, which states decorative walls and fences not more than 18 inches high at their highest point may be erected in the front yard. What we have here is that the retaining walls that we are showing that are located along the edge of the parking area and along the front face of the building are as high as 10 feet in some locations. Now, we weren't quite sure that this was even applicable to this particular zone, but to be on the safe side, we noticed for it. What the intent of that ordinance was about providing or ensuring that open areas would still exist within the community, that people would not erect a fence or a wall that would kind of hide them from pedestrian traffic along the street or vehicular traffic and be able to identify the building. That's not the case here. The purpose of the walls is to provide for a terraced landscape effect that, in my mind, is a real positive for the project. And I believe the variance could be granted on both the C1 and C2 criteria. On the C1 criteria, the topography in this area, it can be a little bit excessive, and that the need for retaining walls, obviously greater than 18 inches, is appropriate. Under the C2 criteria, I believe that it's clear that the benefits outweigh any detriments, that the positive criteria is advanced by promoting the general welfare, safety, providing sufficient space in appropriate locations for a variety of residential uses. In this case, it's not only senior housing, but it's affordable housing as well. So those are definitely advances in the goals and objectives of the municipal land use law. Also, to promote a desirable visual effect through creative civic design. In my mind, the way we've developed these retaining walls with the landscaping that we're proposing, they certainly beautify the area. And keep in mind that in our mind, this was the best planning alternative. Because if you strictly complied with the ordinance and needed to eliminate retaining walls along Forest Hill Road, we could have a different building configuration that was placed right up on the setback, and we would need no variance. But in my mind, the reorientation of the building, the pushing it back from the right-of-way, allowing for the intrusion or the inclusion of these terraced retaining walls, in my mind, is clearly a better planning proposal than strict compliance with the ordinance. So I believe that variance could be granted without any substantial detriment to the public good or intent and purpose of your zone plan. I think this project overall advances the municipality's goal of providing affordable housing in appropriate locations. Other than a few little hiccups with regard to loading and possibly assignment of parking spaces, the plan totally is compliant with the ordinance that was put in place. We do have, I didn't mention that, we do have a monument sign proposed at the entrance in the center median of the island at the entrance to the project. This would be fully compliant, set back 5 feet from the right-of-way line as required by the ordinance. And each of the buildings will have an identification sign over the entrance canopy, which is also permitted by the ordinance. And we also have a number of traffic control signs that would be utilized throughout the project. Again, all in compliance with the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, and consistent with what you typically see in a project of this type. So I don't...
What specifically is the variance?
The walls we're proposing are 10 feet high. The ordinance indicates that retaining walls cannot be higher than 18 inches. It's a height variance.
One wall or more than one?
It's a series of walls that exist and create a terracing effect. There's a single wall that runs across the entire front of the building, between Forest Hill Road and the building. There are retaining walls that are below grade, that are not visible, that are less than 18 inches high, that form the detention basins. I don't believe those require a variance, but I believe the ones that are along the front facade, as I'm pointing to here, might require a variance.
Mr. Lanzafama, as I recall that, I was going to pick up on it. Okay. As I recall, that ordinance on the 18-inch permissive referred to a front yard decorative wall.
Correct.
You're talking about a retaining wall of
That's
multiple feet.
That's correct.
So you're really talking about a separate section of the ordinance. I don't have it before me at this point, but considering the height of the retaining wall, is there a requirement that there be a fence atop it for safety reasons?
There is a fence proposed on top of this wall. And the fence is compliant with regard to the maximum wall height that is permitted under the ordinance, which is 120 inches.
Can you just show us real quick where that condition is going to exist, the multiple, the tiered walls?
So the wall that's exposed, that's visible from the street, is the retaining wall that I'm pointing to along the front of building number 3. The retaining walls that you see that outline detention basin 6 and detention basin 5, you don't see at all. Those are below grade, and those I don't believe need a variance. But what we were not clear on, and we just wanted to err on the side of caution and ask for the variance. If the board feels that a variance is not required, so be it. So it's just this retaining wall that runs across the front of the site.
And that wall's up to 10 feet in some of
That gets up to 10 feet high.
And so what's the topo from there to the curb? Just generally.
If you go back
Is it
to,
above or
I
below?
closed that.
The topo from that wall to the curb?
From the top of the wall to the curb,
Or the base of the wall?
well,
Trying
to the base of the wall, it
understand
varies,
what we're talking
up to 10 feet. In other words, this is the low end, this is the high end, is towards the building.
Right.
So it creates this upper plateau in which we've done an extensive amount of landscaping on to help soften the appearance of the building.
But when you're looking at it when you're driving by, are you looking up and it's 10 feet on top of that, or is it
No,
relatively flat?
because about 5 or 6 feet of the wall is actually buried in the basin. So the exposed area is only about 4 feet high. And with the landscaping that we're proposing along Forest Hill Road, you hardly even notice it.
Well, we'll see that one.
Correct.
Correct.
Mr. Conway has some good exhibits for you.
The section you were thinking you may need a variance, that's the section under fences that refers only to decorative walls, correct?
That was my take on it, but I've run into a problem with Ms. Jackson on several occasions.
I don't, my sense is that that section's not applicable. The other section that caps it at 10 feet is what's applicable to me.
Correct.
Because that
And that
refers to
we're
retaining
compliant.
walls versus
And that we are
decorative walls.
compliant with.
And that's my sense as well.
I'm sorry.
That is my sense as well.
Yes, okay.
But I do have a question on the building identification sign that you mentioned. Is that going to be on the wall or on a canopy?
It's going to be on top of the canopy.
But then I think you need a variance for that. I beg your pardon?
Hi, this is Barbara Allen from Beacon Planning. The ordinance actually permits the signage subject to the review. So there isn't a prohibition against signage on top of the canopy?
Thank you.
Barbara, what's your feeling on the wall? The variance required?
I'd actually advise him just to bring it up and discuss it and request it because the variant, it's not clear. There are times where the board has interpreted the retaining wall to kind of be a fence. So we wanted to make sure that was brought up to your attention.
Is somebody going to tell us about illumination of the monument sign? Where-
It's going to be backlit letters. At the section on signage. Yeah, it says 14E, on-site directional and wall-mounted building identification signs. Traffic safety signage shall be permitted, subject to appropriate limitations as determined by the...
Yeah, that is wall-mounted. It doesn't say anything about canopies. So you probably ought to play safe and get some kind of specific approval from the board.
Sure. The, Mr. Appel will go through his architectural plans which show the signage on the canopies. Again, this would be more of a C2 variance. It's aesthetics. It lends itself very nicely with the architecture. The size is not offensive. I think they're 2 foot high by 9 feet wide. So they're just single letters mounted atop the canopies. So I believe that once you see them, you would agree with me that they are aesthetically pleasing, and the C2 criteria of the MLUL could support a variance of that type should one be required. We don't see any negative impact. It's not like they're visible to the general public. They're more for to help people identify the location of the building, which building they're in, helps emergency services identify the building so that they can more quickly access the building where they're needed.
I think you've made a good presentation as to why the sign is something that should be approved. But I think since the ordinance does not cover canopy signs, you probably ought to ask for the variance that you have in mind.
Okay.
So just to clarify, what's on the canopy sign, just the number?
They're on the architectural plans. Right now, I think it just says like Building 1, Building 2, Building 3.
Right.
We don't know if they're going to be assigned specific street numbers. I imagine that the Postal Service and the emergency services would want a specific number on each of the buildings.
Are you going to handle the site lighting, or is that Mr. Feld?
Brian's going to handle it. Mr. Conroy's going to handle it.
Right.
Including sconces on the sides of the buildings, all of that?
He's going to handle that as well as the landscaping elements of the site. The landscaping elements of the site.
Is there anything you wanted to discuss in Rocco's letter?
I believe we covered mostly everything. And the one thing I raised, the question was about adding catch basins in the swale. We're willing to do that. I believe we've indicated that all of the utilities on the site are going to be privately owned and operated. The sanitary sewer, the water, the pump station, those will be all owned by the property owner and maintained by them. We do have a letter from Mont McDonald with regard to inspection of downstream sanitary sewer lines. We're going to comply with that memo and provide them with whatever information they need to allow the municipality to sign off on our TWA application, our treatment works approval application.
I'm trying to find it, but I can't seem to find it. There was a comment about separate consultant for sewer and water, Rocco?
Right.
Yeah, he just mentioned
We
we.
just
But that was just about cameraing the line, not about capacity or anything else?
Correct. Once we video the line and determine its condition, we're going to survey it, provide Mont McDonald with that information, and they're going to do an analysis. They will then determine whether or not there's any issues, and then they would authorize Ms. Hardeby to sign off on our TWA application. If there's issues, then they have to be corrected.
Understood.
I just had one other question. Sure, Rocco Marucci, Assistant Township Engineer. The roof drains, is the entire roof drainage system tied in to the basins,
And
or?
some are tied into the basin. Some we were proposing at the back end of the site to discharge onto splash pads to allow it to filtrate towards the wetland areas.
Gotcha.
We thought that was a good BMP approach.
So the only thing I would ask is whatever roof drains will be is to show where. Just because when we get to inspection points, I want to know where roof drains are being tied in.
Yeah, we're still waiting for the mechanical engineer to finalize that arrangement, and once we know that for sure, then I could add it to my plan, so it'll be part of resolution compliance, if you will.
Perfect. That was the only outstanding comment I had, really.
Any other professional comments? Questions, rather? Mr. Klein?
So how does the board want to handle, I'm sorry, Lee Klein, Board Traffic Engineer, Klein. How do you guys want to handle the loading spaces as far as location near the elevator? Do we want them to modify some of the parking to be able to accommodate a couple of more loading spaces?
My thought would be we're probably not going to finish tonight, so maybe you guys
Okay.
huddle up on that and talk about it.
Well, yeah, that was clear that we were going to have to modify that, provide some additional loading areas.
Okay.
And lose a few spots, maybe, but we're definitely going to modify that.
Okay.
Well, you got the parking.
Yeah, we have
Right,
sufficient parking.
right, that's exactly what I was
You're
going to
aiming
say.
for a certain
Right.
demographic and clientele, I think you want to have, not have the loading going on when people are coming back with their groceries and,
All right.
Anybody on the
Yeah,
board?
And then
I'm
I
sorry,
thought this
sure.
came up at the track meeting, but the distance from the trash room, or the compactor room to the trash, what'd you call it?
Refuse area.
Distribution to the truck seems really far. And I thought that came up at the track meeting, that you're gonna try to, like in Building 3, maybe flip it with the mechanical room, because there's already an elevator shaft there anyway.
Well, one of the things that Chief Mullen wanted was to make sure that all of the refuse collection rooms were located at the very end of the building, on a corner, or somewhere that was easily accessible by his people.
Right, no, that I understand. I'm just trying to say the one where it comes down from all the
Oh,
floors
okay.
and then gets compacted and sent over to them.
I got
Why
you.
not make that a little bit closer? You're gonna be dripping stuff through the parking lot?
That I would kind of kick off to Mr. Appel.
Lee, it did come up, and we discussed it, but, I mean, that's a management decision. If they want to have their people move them, 300 yards to where they have to bring them out, then that's their choice.
300 yards.
Anybody on the board have any questions for Mr. Lonzafama? No? Does anybody from the public have any questions for Mr. Lonzafama? Sir? Sure. Just give us your name and address.
Thank you, Samuel Klobanoff. I'm the 339 East Mount Pleasant Avenue. I'm the rabbi of Congregation Eitz Chaim, which is technically 343 East Mount Pleasant. You mentioned earlier the Department of Transportation. Will you be installing sidewalks on Mount Pleasant Avenue?
Yes.
That's amazing, thank you. We've been trying for over 10 years to have sidewalks, because my constituents, we walk from
Sure.
the West Orange area there, and it's a very busy road.
Yes.
By the way, this is getting me out of Passover preparation, so if you want to give a
I'm
longer
sorry.
answer, I can be very, very welcome. Thank you.
You could think of another question.
Yes, are you busy tomorrow night for Seder? No,
Be happy
because
to attend.
we've been lobbying, because we have people with young children,
Right.
and it's a very, very dangerous corridor. And I could just tell, thank you, because that's a very welcome development, pun very much intended, for my constituents. So thank you very much, and I appreciate it. You're very well. Thank you.
Anybody else? Seeing none. Let's take 5 minutes. We'll come back at 9:30.
is, yeah, our court reporter, I'm not sure where she went. Sorry. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're back. We next have Mr. Brian Conway, our landscape architect, who will be testifying regarding site landscaping and lighting. If I could have him sworn in, please.
You swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Conway, if you just briefly for the board, state your education, experience, and qualifications.
Certainly. I'm Brian Conway, I'm a landscape architect, a graduate of Rutgers University with a degree in landscape architecture. I'm also a professional planner. I'm not here as a professional planner tonight. I've been before this board numerous times, not nearly as many times as Michael, but numerous times.
Very good.
And my licenses are current and valid.
Thank you, Mr. Conway. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Conway, if you could just briefly provide an overview of the proposed landscaping and lighting for the site.
Certainly. So what we have on the screen right now is the lighting plan that was submitted. So the lighting design process began with a review of the surrounding areas and the lighting needs. It was obvious that we needed a high-performance luminaire with good distribution and a high level of control to prevent spillage onto the adjacent neighboring properties. I reviewed the available options for lighting and selected the U.S. Architectural Lighting Razor, which is a line of decorative luminaires with efficient output and good distribution that are with highly controlled photometrics. There's a sketch of it in the upper right-hand corner. As you can see, it's a pole-top mounted fixture with some gracefully arching arms that lead up to a flat panel on the top. All the lighting is focused downward. We have 6 different light fixtures that we're using. We have option A, which is a building-mounted version of the Razor fixture, which is a 15-foot Type 3. It's 32.4 watts and 4,140 lumens. We have option B, which is a pole-mounted 15-foot Type 2, which is a special median fixture, which we have on the Boulevard Island coming into the project. That's 42.7 watts and 6,280 lumens. Type C, all of the rest of the fixtures now are going to be an 18-foot mounting height. So Type C was a Type 3 asymmetrical distribution, which is a wider and forward throw, 42.7 watts and 6,400 lumens. Type D, which is a forward throw with a house side shield, 42.7 watts, 4,520 lumens. Type E, which is pole mounted at 18 feet, and it's type forward throw, 42.7 watts, 5,760 lumens. And then Type F, which is a Type 5, which is an all-around distribution, 42.7 watts and 6,480 lumens. So I had two. Yes, I think it's number 6. So I had 2 different lighting design parameters that I used. The first one was for the entry drive and the entry plaza. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to have a slightly enhanced light level for those, as those were the main entrance to the site and the main entrance to the clubhouse and the building. My target design parameter were between 0.5 and 1 foot candle minimum and a 1.5 to 2 foot candle average. And again, these were the Type 2 with the median fixtures and with a 15-foot mounting height, trying to provide a really good level of control. So for the entry drive, the statistics that I achieved were a 0.5 foot candle minimum, a maximum of 3.4 foot candles, an average of 1.6, a minimum to max ratio of 6.8 to 1, and an average to max ratio, which is uniformity, that's what I always look for, of 3.2 to 1. Whenever I'm able to get that uniformity ratio below 4, I feel like I've really done well, so 3.2 to 1 is quite well. For the entry plaza, we have a minimum of 1.1, a little bit higher, maximum of 2.2, an average of 1.7, a minimum to max of 2 to 1, and an average to max of 1.5 to 1. So that's going to be a very uniform, even light level. For the balance of the site, the design parameters I chose was a half a foot candle minimum and a 1 to 1.5 foot candle average. So for parking lot 1, we have a 0.5 foot candle minimum, 2.6 foot candle max, 1.3 average, 5.2 to 1, and a 2.6 to 1. I'm sorry, 5.2 to 1 is max to min, and 2.6 is average to min. So that's very good uniformity. For lot 2, 0.5 foot candles minimum, 2.2 foot candles for the max, 1.1 average, 4.4 to 1 max to min, and a 2.2 to 1 average to min. Lot 3, again, 0.5 for the minimum, 2.1 for the maximum, 0.9 for the average, 4.2 to 1 for the max to min, and 1.8 to 1 for the uniformity, which is the average to min. And finally, the rear drive and parking area, 0.5 for the minimum, 2.9 for the max, 1.2 for the average, 5.8 to 1 for the max to min, and then 2.4 to 1 for the average to min. That's uniformity. So we have really good light levels and really good uniformity throughout the project. The lighting is compliant with the land use ordinance.
I'm sorry, do you mind just slowing down a little bit?
Sure.
Thanks.
The lighting was designed in compliance with the land use ordinance. The lighting was designed to ensure safe movement of people and vehicles throughout the site. All light fixtures are aimed downward, and lighting was designed to minimize any spillage on adjacent properties. The maximum spillage at the property line is a 0.1 foot candle.
So you have spillage of 0.1 foot candles and where is that?
Along the property line,
With regard to where
along
we have
along the-
residences on the other side?
Along the entry drive coming in.
So where the houses, the backs of the houses from Forest Hill Drive have spillage on them?
There's virtually no spillage. It's 0.1 foot candles at the property line.
Oh, 0.1.
0.1. I didn't take into account that we also have the evergreen buffer there, and we're gonna have a 6-foot solid fence along that property line also, which is not taken into account on the statistics. So there won't be any spillage onto
And
the neighboring properties.
besides downlight, do they have house side shields?
House side shields were necessary. The boulevard is lit with that, again, that type 2 median fixture, which is a specifically designed fixture with lighting cutoffs, pretty extreme, so it gets the light in the roadway and then cuts off very quickly thereafter.
So the backs of the houses on Forest Hill are not going to look at it a lighting source?
No, I don't believe they'll see, there won't be any light spillage onto their property, and I don't believe they'll be affected by the lighting source.
Would they see lighting from the posts on the easterly side of the boulevard?
There are no lights on the easterly side.
All the lighting is
In the median,
in the median.
yes. So it was a tricky lighting plan that I spent a lot of time and sweated the details to get it all to work. So I think I'm very comfortable with what we've done. One thing that,
Along on the top above the boulevard, that's the fence?
I'm gonna go old school, because
Yeah, I appreciate it.
it's right along the line.
That's the fence,
Correct.
that's big fun.
The other thing that we wanted to mention, the monument sign is going to be ground lit, not backlit. I was told to correct on that one. And then regarding the lighting from the building, there is no lighting on the buildings that contribute to site lighting, other than I think we have 1 or 2 building-mounted lights that are shown on the lighting plan, the type A fixtures.
The area around the curb that goes to Building 3, and then there's the lot, there's the emergency exit roadway, and then there is a lot. And, I mean, it's very hard to see the numbers on the plan that we're looking at. My old eyes don't see them at all. So that shaded area, what is the light spillage, and that's it?
Again, at the property line, there's gonna be a solid fence and an evergreen buffer, so there won't be any spillage onto the neighboring properties.
At all?
At all. The calculations were done without accounting for that.
And on that side, also, the people, because that's along the full side of their homes, to be able to see the light, looking at a light source. So no house side shields there either?
The house side shields were provided where they were required to control the lighting. So there's no lights near the property line in any of those situations, I don't believe.
As long as you're comfortable to be able to say to me that the people that are living there are not going to be looking at a light bulb if they're looking out of the side of their house.
I'm good.
Okay.
That concludes my lighting testimony. If there's any more questions, or would you like to do landscape as well and catch them both together? That's great.
One question, I don't know whether you touched on it in the lighting, so I'll just ask it now. The fence along the western property line, looks like it extends to about the middle of the house that's immediately adjacent. I don't know if anybody's been in contact with that neighbor to see whether they'd want it further, closer to Mount Pleasant.
I'm pretty sure that we're going to be running that fence the entire length of those property lines. I don't know what's...
Well, not all the way to Mount Pleasant, I hope.
No.
Because that might look awkward. I'm just saying a little bit further, you might.
If you want to pull out, it's going to be...
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
It just
certainly
shows it stopping
wherever
at
there's
the
going to be
middle.
any impact or effect for the neighbors.
Okay.
We'll pull it up to, at least to the front of their house.
I think the neighbor wanted theirs, but you don't want it all the way up here, but maybe somewhere to kind of block this building.
Anybody have any other questions about the light? Landscaping it is.
It's gonna be exhibit A2, I believe.
Yeah, we had submitted this.
Oh, this is A1? This was,
I'm afraid to scroll, because
it's
scrolling
A2.
didn't work so good with Mike. To see what the sheet number is.
Sheet 10. It's a colorized version of 10.
It's a colorized version of sheet 10, so if we call this A2?
yeah, we'll call it A2.
So for the landscape plan, the design process and a few key objectives began with a site analysis and review of existing vegetation, like we always do. And as Mike has said, the site is encumbered with about a third of it as wetlands. And we made an early decision on the project that we weren't going to do any wetlands buffer averaging. We were going to try to keep everything clear of the wetlands and the wetlands buffer. So that really drove our initial design intent. The other objective of the landscape plan was to provide a sense of entry, enhance stormwater management areas, provide plantings and buffering from adjacent residential uses, and address the interaction with the street and the buffering. I mentioned the site analysis about how we're staying out of the wetlands and the buffer. For the sense of entry, we have a boulevard island coming off of Mount Pleasant Avenue, and we have trees tightly grouped in those, and the trees and the lights were worked, so the spacing worked together. So we basically did the light spacing and then worked the tree spacing to make it all work together very nicely. At the circular terminus of the boulevard, we have a grouping of multi-stem trees, and then at the entrance to the building, the entry plaza, we have a grove of honey locust trees, providing that procession and entry into the project. Another thing we were trying to do was enhance the stormwater management areas. The Mount Pleasant stormwater management area was designed to be integrated with the landscape. As you saw when Mike was talking about it before, the landform, the basin shape, and the plantings all work together to provide a stormwater management area that also functions as a naturalistic landscape buffer. And we have a lawn panel that runs throughout the whole area that provides for some passive recreational use.
What is the building setback to the curb? I should ask Mr. Long about that.
Mike? 85 to the curb, 85.
Is that uniform? Pretty much, is that 85?
I don't think I'm getting it quick enough.
Here goes.
There we go.
There we go.
Like I said, too old to be good at technology and not old enough to get sympathy for not being good enough with it. So what we're looking at right now is a typical detention basin planting area. This is an exhibit that we prepared after having a meeting with the client, trying to make sure we had all our stuff taken care of before the meeting. He wanted us to show a typical stormwater management planting area. And this
So
is...
this is Exhibit A3.
Okay, A3?
We'll mark it, yeah.
So this is basin number 5. Basin number 5. And what we're showing is there's a 10-foot-high wall along the building side, and we have a mix of flowering trees, evergreen trees, shade trees, large shrubs, flowering shrubs, and perennials and ornamental grasses. Just to get kind of a feel and a flavor for how that wall is going to be faced down and what kind of plantings are going to be happening in some of the detention basins.
Are the detention basins fenced, and how much water is?
So the detention basin number 1, I think I can do most of them. Detention basin number 1, which is out in front, is never going to have very much water in it. Is that correct? It's basically a very large, flat, wide open lawn area. It's 18 inches deep, potentially. And the whole idea behind that was that it would just be a large, gentle swale, basically. Detention basins 5 and 6 are going to be fenced all around because they're surrounded by retaining walls, and the fencing for the retaining walls will also serve as the fencing for the basin. And 3 is going to be the basin. I'm going to go back to the main plan. If I can get my double click quick enough. Okay. Pressure, not the speed. Sorry, the lighting plan, but this basin is also planted. I think this is basin 3? 4. And I'm not sure. 2 fenced? On the walls. Fenced on the wall side.
And what's the fencing look like?
It's a metal picket fence?
Yes. What was the fence? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Metal picket.
So like the aluminum squares?
What's the height of those fences?
48?
For compliance.
The next design parameter that we had was buffering the adjacent residential uses. As you can see, we're providing an evergreen buffer against all of the residential uses along the properties on Forest Hill Road, along the properties on Nance Drive, and as well as the one on Forest Hill Road down by basin number 6.
Looking at your eastern side, there are some properties that don't back on the wetlands, but you don't seem to have any plantings to protect them.
I have an exhibit for that. I'll get to that in a second.
Thank you.
And as you can see, where we have the ability to open up, the buffer is not just a single row of trees, it's a staggered row of evergreen trees with ornamental trees and shade trees mixed in with it. The idea was to really try to go all out and make the buffer effective as well as attractive. So to Mr. Klein's question, the upper sketch here shows some additional planting next to basin number 2, and behind those properties in South Orange. When we were West Orange, I'm sorry. When we were working through the design process, we were trying to determine what, if any, of the trees could be saved there. and we weren't able to get it done in time for our submission, which is why we prepared this exhibit. We weren't able to prepare the plantings in time for our submission, which is why we prepared this exhibit to clarify that. And there are some existing trees in that area that we're going to try to save, and we'll get the evergreen trees planted around there. And I've also included a shade tree in that area also. And then if we could look at this same plan, and I guess this is A3?
Yes, A3.
The lower right-hand corner shows the lower right-hand corner of Building 3, where is it Lot 37 on Forest Hill Road, where we provided some additional planting based upon our client's conversation with the neighbor, that we're going to provide some additional evergreen plantings on the top of the wall at the corner of the building to provide some, additional and enhanced buffering. Okay. For the next thing I'd like to discuss is the street interaction and buffering. And I have some sections that we can look at to illustrate this. So this would be, I guess, A4?
Correct.
And what we have here are, if you look at the little key map, we have two sections through the basin number 1 that depicts the plantings, as well as the landform of the basin and the building and all how it kind of relates and ties into the street. So we already discussed how the Mount Pleasant basins and plantings were designed and what the intent was. We also, if you look at this section, you see the street trees nearest the street, and then you also could see that there's a double buffer proposed. There's a row of evergreen trees and mixed planting out near East Mount Pleasant Avenue, and then there's an additional row up near the building. So the top one shows the condition where the planting is at the same level as East Mount Pleasant Avenue, and then the lower one, which is taken through the middle of the building, shows the planting up on a slight berm that we were able to create there to get the plantings up a little bit higher, but you can get a very good feel of the scale of the plantings in the buildings and how that's all going to interact. I know that I've prepared these exhibits for you folks many times before in the past, and I've used similar tree blocks. They indicate an approximate 10-year growth rate. The evergreen trees are shown at 18 feet by 9 feet. The shade trees are shown by 28 feet by 15 feet wide, and the ornamental trees are shown at 16 feet high by 8 feet wide. I think that that's a conservative look at what those trees would look like in a plus or minus 10-year picture. Okay. I also prepared an exhibit so we could look at the Forest Hill Road. And I think that the sections will help really illustrate what Mike had said. This would be A4?
A5.
A5. So this is site section heading south. So the upper one, if you look at the key, is the furthest in Forest Hill Road, kind of near that culvert that Mike had mentioned before. And there's a little group of existing trees in there that are shown in the light green color. And then the proposed plantings are shown after that. And you can see that the lower wall near the street is the wall that you look over, and then the upper wall nearer the building is the larger wall that Mike had discussed. And you can see some indication of how we're going to try to plant those areas to provide a little attenuation of the wall, as well as provide the biodetention benefits within the basins. Now, when I took these sections, I felt that it was best, I took them on a 45-degree angle so that they're roughly 45, so they're perpendicular to the face of the building. I felt that that would be more indicative of somebody driving down the road as opposed to taking the section straight through. I don't think anybody's going to stop and then look at the building. They're going to be driving back and forth. So that's what these sections represent. But you can see very clearly how that basin is sunken in, and the basin is tucked in very nicely. So the Forster Road basins are similarly planted and buffered. The basins are sunken in and therefore less visible from the road. The planting is mixed evergreen deciduous planted in a naturalistic style. The basin design and planting layout enable us to create a similar feel to the Mount Pleasant Basin streetscape. Similarly, there are additional layers of plantings along the access drive, again buffering and providing filtered views of the building. So this one here doesn't really show it because there's no additional layer of evergreen trees. I believe the next one, if we scroll down, is taken a little bit further into the site. And there you could see, similar to the front, how we have a double buffer. We have the buffer that's nearer the street. We have our basin with the basin planting, and then we have the buffer that's between the basin and the access drive. So this would be the sections heading south. And I have another group of sections heading north. So this one here, we have actually 3 plantings. We have the buffer planting at the roadway. We have there's evergreen trees behind the shade tree. They're kind of obscured. And then we have an additional shade tree up near the building. This would be the access drive. And then the radial parking would be part of that wider strip of asphalt and pavement.
This is A6.
A6. And then the lower section is the final one, and that again shows the roadway, the buffer near the building, buffer near the roadway, the wall going down to the basin area, then the wall coming up, and then the plantings between the basin and the building. To recap and get some statistics on the record, as Mike had mentioned before, there were 1,702 existing trees on site, 429 to be removed, with a replacement requirement of 590. We have 467 replacements provided on the submitted plans. That's 116 shade trees, 37 ornamental trees, 314.
Can I get that a little slower? Sorry, 116.
Where do you want me to stop? 467 replacements, 116 shade trees, 37 ornamental trees, 314 evergreen trees, and then that puts us at 123 replacement tree shortfall. The number of trees planted will increase because the numbers that I have shown are calculated here do not take into account the additional exhibit that we prepared with the additional trees. And then it also doesn't account for what we're going to do with the basins. There'll probably be another. We're still going to be short. It's our client's directive to try to plant as many of those trees as we can on site so that they could enjoy them and the tenants could enjoy them. And so we're going to try to do everything we can to find opportunities to increase our tree yield during construction. And that concludes my landscape testimony. I'm happy to answer any questions in that regard.
The evergreens that you're showing along the, well, really everywhere, but along the western border, what type of evergreens are you going to plant?
I believe that those are green giant arborvitaes.
Okay, because you were given dimensions, growth dimensions, sounded more like a pine.
Yeah,
You were given like
they're going to
pine
be
trees that didn't
maintainable
fit.
in a little bit of a narrower form, even if they had to be sheared ultimately.
Understood, okay.
And they're going to get the height.
Yeah,
that's
when
gonna
you
be-
quoted the 18-foot, I think you had a much larger diameter than I
Yeah.
think would fit there and be appropriate up against the fence. Yeah,
That was just a typical evergreen tree
Gotcha.
for the section.
okay.
Anybody from the board, professionals, landscapers, anybody from the public have any questions?
Hello everyone, this is Rishikesh Piparipalli from 18 Forsil Road. 18 Forsil Road. I'm actually facing the back side on the building, on the west side. So just, I had a little concern. First of all, I want to thank the township and the developer for making the adjustment to remove the secondary access point from Forest Hill Road. That was a great win for everyone, I guess. Little concerns, I think, yes, right over there. So,
Which one was your house, I'm sorry?
18 Forest Hill Road, like
Is it the middle one?
lot 30, if you can see that.
Yeah, lot 30 is the
Yes,
middle one.
that's the one. Yeah, so I think the trees that have been proposed there are probably 7 to 8 feet, but you have a 10-year projection. But I think until 10 years, we want to make sure there is enough privacy for our backyard, especially because this is a much elevated, as Mr. Michael on the farm mentioned. It's 50 feet higher than our grade, the starting grade, and the building's going to be 40 feet high on top of it. So they can easily look into our bedrooms. So I don't think the proposed tree plan would help the privacy. Like I think even there's a fence there, but I really couldn't understand. Looks like there's a retainer wall and there's a 4 feet fence. But I want to make sure the fence is high enough to cover the vehicles, and trees probably should be long enough to make sure there's some privacy to our bedrooms.
So, in the area we're talking about here, we have the height differential between your property and our
Yes.
property here. There's a fence, there's a row of evergreen trees, there's the row of street trees down the center median, as well as
True,
trees and evergreen trees along the
Yeah.
other side of the building.
Some of the renderings that you have shown for the Forest Hill Road, like on the basin side, it really has pretty good view from the roof line all the way to the street, right? I mean, I would love to see something like that for our bedrooms, because I think the trees gonna be not big enough, and they'll be able to see from the maybe second floor or third floor into our bedrooms.
We could certainly study it, but I think that the way your house is situated and the height of your house, I think that they're gonna be looking, the people in the proposed building are gonna be looking more at your roof, looking downward, not inward.
Yeah, I'm not sure, again, like if there's something like that kind of a rendering where it shows the roof line, like where is it leading on top of the trees? I don't know. I don't think the trees can block it too close. So I'm not sure if that means like a taller trees or something else. I don't know what the solution is, but I'm just,
Yeah, we'll do a cross-section and work with you on that.
okay.
Could you spell your last name for me?
Okay, it's Pippadippall. HRISHIKESH. It's a long name.
So just as a point of reference, the finished floor elevation versus the curb at Forest Hill, you're higher or what?
Higher.
You're higher? So it's running out.
Yeah, I can put the section back on if you'd like to see it.
No, I think that's something I think
We have the
trying to
basin,
figure out how to solve the problem.
and then it comes up.
That tall. I'm not sure.
I think when we do the layout of the gradients between the property, I think that the gradients between the property are gonna solve most of that problem right off the bat.
Anybody else? Seeing none, Mr. Fennerly?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next witness is Mr. Gary Dean, our traffic engineer.
This is probably going to be our last witness, so, Mr. Appel, you're available on the 19th?
I stand corrected. We're going to have Mr. Lawrence Appel, our architect,
Okay,
testify next.
that was the question.
A-P-P-E-L. Lawrence Laird.
So we try and conclude at 10:30. I promised Rudy that we would be done at 10:30 since he wasn't here. My
Okay.
parents aren't home, so if you, I'm sure you can get this done in 20 minutes, Mr. Appel.
We'll try our best.
No parking, no trash. We did that.
That's right. Yeah, I think we can do it.
Beautiful elevations.
He's under pressure. Remember that odd couple where Oscar Madison couldn't type his own name because Bobby Riggs had him so nervous? Oscar Madisocks.
All right, let's get Larry sworn in.
Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. My name is Lawrence, Laurance, Appel, Appel. I'm a registered architect in the state of New Jersey. I hold a Bachelor of Science degree in engineering as well as a master's in architecture. I've appeared before this board numerous times, and I would request to be qualified as an expert in architecture.
We'll accept it.
Thank you.
Thank you. To maybe get this out of the way, the exhibits, I don't need to tag the drawings, but should I tag
Correct.
the exhibits?
Yeah,
I have
that's exact-
5 renderings.
Right.
Where do we leave off?
All the new renderings would start with Exhibit A7.
A7. Okay, so color rendering number 1 is a view from Route 10 with full landscaping, that's A7. I have the same view, but with landscaping shown transparently so we can see the building a little bit more. I guess that will be A8.
Correct.
I have color rendering 2B, which is an interior view showing the clubhouse and part of building number 3. I think that would be A9.
Correct.
Color rendering view 3A, Forest Hill Road showing mature landscaping, that'll be A10.
Yes.
And a color rendering view 4A, which is another view just slightly turned on Forest Hill Road showing mature landscaping again, that'll be A11. And I'll show these a little bit later in my presentation. Both Mr. Lanzafama and Mr. Conway, both were very thorough. I will try not to repeat things. Thank you for the board and the board professionals for all of the comments and feedbacks. I think it helped us make this a better project. This was designed to be conforming with the RAIO, Inclusionary Adult Residential Overlay District. We worked very hard with the team. Landscape, site, traffic, everything to make the project interesting, work well with the site. This is intended to be a luxury community. As was discussed, the buildings were turned, oriented, creating open courtyards in order to provide open space on the property. We have 254 rental units split up in 3 buildings, 203 market units, 51 affordable units. The affordable units are all well integrated and represented in each of the buildings, a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units throughout. Each of the buildings were designed with similar aesthetics and design parameters. We wanted them to all be integrated into a single community. The distribution is shown, I have on drawing C-01, has a unit distribution matrix which discusses how all of the buildings, the units are distributed and shows tabulations. I'm going to move on PB 1.1, and the comments I'm going to be making are common to all 3 of the buildings. Each of the buildings were designed and accommodate the grading and topography of the site. As Mr. Lanzafama said, they were designed to nestle into the grade with parking tucked under. Accordingly, the low side exposes access to the parking level. The parking was already discussed by Mr. Lanzafama. Parking is a combination of secure and assigned stalls. Yes, we will have security gates for the building. Parking areas within the secured area will be assigned stalls. The access to the secure portion of the garage will be via key fob. I think Mr. Lanzafama was spot on that building number 3 will have an area that can be easily identified as a loop where you can have public access so that you can have additional guest parking in that area. That's the only building that I believe was a little bit short. Access to the secure portion of the garage, again, will be key fob, and first responders will have a Knox box to get into the garage. One of the questions, the garages will be mechanically vented. This is something that gets engineered, not this portion of the project, but gets engineered when we do the permit drawings. Another question that was raised is the garage. Yes, it'll have a finished drop ceiling, but based on the topography and the grading, this set the height of the garages. The garages have ample height. We will have close to about 10 feet in height. And again, this was a product of grading and working with the topography and Mr. Lanzafama. Yes, there is. The building is fully suppressed, the garage all the way up, and all the residential floors above as well.
There's a movement to, and I don't have the tickets, I want to do, to keep the EV stations out of garage areas, because sure all know the occasionally catch on fire. Is that something you've read about or concerned about?
I've heard of things in here. What it will require is, I guess, a nod from Fair Housing Act, because the Fair Housing Act talks about wanting to have all types of parking in all types of areas accessible. So it's, that for me is a question in here, but I think one of the questions that was raised during the track meeting was they wanted access, so if there was a vehicle on fire, they could get to it quickly. So either close to an outside wall or to provide some entrances. And I think we can work with the authorities having jurisdiction, the first responders, to provide adequate access, be it doors or access through the security gates or what have you.
What about the fire hazard of batteries in the bike room?
Are you talking about for the? So that's something that we've talked about with a couple of developers right now about whether a bike room that is enclosed or a bike room that's not enclosed. Now, the one good thing about this, you're in a fully sprinklered area and it's 3-hour fire protected. So a lot of the fires that you hear about don't have a podium garage. So the fact that they're in the podium garage is fine, and if the local fire authorities have issue and prefer that it to be in a separate room. One idea, separate room, it encloses fire. The other issue is that when it's open, people can see what's happening. You have enhanced early warning detection. So I don't know what the right thing is. I think it's a battery problem that will eventually solve itself, hopefully quickly. But if you have certain directive, we'd be happy to look at that. I think the only discussion that I will have, there's a lot of discussion about trash. We've located these trash rooms for the convenience of the residents, not for the convenience of the landlord. So yes, it is a little less convenient for the landlord, but we tried to make it more convenient for the residents. We are providing compactors. It's set up with the right components. We will try to clarify to make sure that all the access points make sense, and I think that they do right now. There were some questions raised. Well, one of the other items in the garage, there are storage cubbies shown. These cubbies will be at the foot of a parking spot and would be either in some cases for the resident that has that parking spot, and in some cases we have storage cubbies that can be used by other residents. They're not connected to one of the spots.
Are those the 9-by-9 spaces?
Well, no, there's, so I will point to this area. You have storage areas, the STs, and they're kind of dotted around the space. We basically make some accommodations for mechanical space, for utilities, and also for storage. And when the building gets fully engineered, some of these spaces may adjust somewhat. But the idea in here is we thought that we wanted to take this excess spots and provide storage, because I think these are excellent spaces for residents.
So,
what is, I think what Peter is asking is, what is the length of the parking spaces?
no, there are spaces which are 9 feet by 9 feet, and they're in pairs. What are they intended for?
Right, so some of those storage spots are at the foot of a tandem stall, and some of them are at the foot of a regular stall. It's where the building is a little bit deeper than could be needed just for your drive aisle and parking. It just provided, we tried to repurpose those spaces. Some of these areas will be used for utility meters, some of these for mechanical spaces, but where we can accommodate tenant storage, I think it's a great opportunity. So one of the items that was mentioned over here also is we will have a small generator that was located on the site plan for each of the buildings. This is intended to serve security, access controls for the garage, and some lighting for emergencies. Each of the buildings, although similar in design, are a little bit different, and I'll just highlight what's a little bit different. Building number 1, and I'll kind of locate it on the ground floor in here. The lobby entrance is at the garage level, and we'll have a mailroom and package room for residents there. Building number 2, has lobbies at both the garage level and the ground floor. This has to do with where parking is and where access points are. The lobby entrance is at the ground floor. We'll also have a mail and package room for residents. Also, this particular building has an additional spot that is a maintenance area for the landlord, so he has a place for storing materials. One of the things that we discussed is that there may be opportunities there in front of these spaces or on other areas in here where you can provide some additional loading areas, and I think this will be discussed at the next meeting. Building number 3, in a similar way, has lobbies at the garage level and the ground floor. This building is a little bit unique, as we had discussed. We have combined the main building entry with an attached clubhouse, and I'll talk a little bit about that, and I'll bring up the plan a little later. As part of the lobby entrance, we will also have a mail and package room for residents. Also, both building number 2 and building number 3 has an amenity courtyard, amenity deck above portions of the parking. Now I'm going to go to one of the upper floors in here to provide just a sense of how the buildings are set up. Again, I'm looking to discuss the common features, not each of the 3 individual buildings. All the buildings are elevator serviced. Typical of all floors, market and affordable units are intermixed. The unit matrix on the ground, on the cover page, shows the breakdown of each building respectively. Residential units orient around that exterior courtyard, and the courtyard will have passive outdoor spaces for the tenants. These are spaces that have become common and customary for luxury communities like this. The other floors are similar, except that at the upper floor, as I've mentioned on several of our other projects, is we've used the attic space to create some volume for the upper floor units as well as lofts. These units take advantage of the pitch roof and to utilize what normally would be wasted space. The lofts are specifically designed as auxiliary spaces for the residents, and again, similar to what we've done on other projects, we believe this is a perfect complement to the pitch roofs. The lofts will not be a bedroom. The dens will not be a bedroom. These are spaces that are open, not enclosed, and we believe these are great spaces for people working from home or additional space for recreational use, especially in the post-COVID times. Drawing number 1.13, what we've done is we have, let's catch up. The buildings, each of the units in here, I've shown all of the typical units. Just to give a sense, again, these are luxury product, so they're designed consistent with the types of units that we think would be appropriate for this use. One bedroom and den generally will range from about 1,000 to 1,100 square feet. Two bedroom will generally range from about 1,200 to 1,300 square feet. The two bedroom plus loft generally will range from 1,200 to 1,600, and the two bedroom from den will generally range from 1,500 to 1,900 square feet, and some of those will have lofts as well. All of the units have their own heating and air conditioning system. As what we've done on other projects, we've designed these with Magic Pack units, which are self-contained units, but we've turned them 90 degrees from the facade so that they're pointed to the side so they become less apparent and they're hidden in the jukes and jogs of the building. All the units have their own washers and dryers. That includes both market and affordable units as well. I'm going to move to the rendering, and I will...
Larry, before you
Yes.
do that and get off of this, just a couple of quick questions.
Sure.
Hot water for the units is going to be through individual hot water or tankless or?
Right now we're proposing tanked. It hasn't been engineered, but we have shown on the units allocated space for tanked water meters.
I'm just confused in the parking level, you have an area called a compactor trash, you got another area called trash, you got another area called refuse. What's the difference between one and the other?
Okay, so we've located, and I'll give you a good, for instance, I'll take a building, take this building, and so we can look at this a little closer. So we try to get the compactors as close as possible to the elevators for the convenience, so that the chute for the compactor is located as central as possible. At the track meeting, they were asking about possibly creating some of the trash storage closer to the skin of the building. So we repurposed some of these spots, and we thought that close to the entry point, we would provide a place where those roll-off containers could potentially be stored, or some recycling as well. So this was kind of responding to the comments at the track.
Okay, so what you're saying is the trash chute will go down to the compactor, and then that container will get moved to the refuse area?
When they're full, they can be staged in there. In my opinion, you probably don't need that extra storage. It was really an accommodation to the folks at the track meeting.
Okay, so the,
Track, TRA, technical review and
TRAC.
advisory committee. Yep.
Will the compactor rooms have drains and water?
Correct. Drains, water, it's all.
Okay.
All the requirements that make them appropriate. So what we did in the front of the building in here is that we showed, we did two versions of the same rendering. We have one version that shows with the landscaping, and then we took another version where we've basically made the landscaping transparent so you can see the building a little bit better. The height of the buildings is conforming, as was testified by Mr. Lanzafama. We've chosen architectural materials that are common on residential multifamily buildings, but we're using them in a way to articulate these buildings in a little bit of a fresh manner. There's a luxury community. We didn't want it to look just like another one of the buildings we all see, all over. So we feel that this design works well with the building geometry and has provided opportunities for lots of breaks, jukes, and jogs. Some of these are part of the architecture. Some of these are part of balconies as well. And they provided opportunities to change materials and add architectural detailing as well. The facades have been carefully designed and oriented to work with the site design and grading, with extensive landscaping designed, which was both on the exterior portions of the site as well as interior. The primary facade materials, and these renderings show our proposed colors and materials. The colors and materials are based upon actual products, but that sometimes manufacturers change, so they may be slightly altered based on availability, but what we're proposing in here is based on real materials. We've chosen a pitch roof for the building, which is consistent with the ordinance. Roof finishes will be architectural roof shingles. We've included brick veneer at the base of the building and also to highlight the projections. Decorative architectural metal railings. These are both on balconies as well as balconettes. Have chosen dark trim for the balconies as well as the windows to help accent the architecture. The siding and the architectural panel and trim were designed, and that's these elements that you can kind of see along the top portion of the building. We propose to use a combination of metal panel and trim as well as fiber cement. We're using these interchangeably on the facade, and the primary reason to select one or the other, because they look so similar, is based on available colors and texture and where we have certain detailing issues as well. We've also included a natural wood tone accent, which we felt helped warm the building up as well. And again, the building has both balconies as well as balconettes to provide some changes in the architectural fenestration. The takeaway for all this is that the materials are quality. These are designed for long-term good appearance as well as low maintenance. So our idea here is to have premium materials such that the building will continue to look good for years to come. And what we've proposed on these buildings is the facades. It's not a front facade. This continued treatment is around all four sides. So it's not like you turn a corner and something that faces the back part of the site is stripped down. It's all designed to have the same visual aesthetic. So I'm going to switch to the clubhouse.
Can I ask you a quick question? Where are those
Yes.
magic packs? Why you had to go back?
Oh,
Leak line.
yes, let me,
You said they were hidden?
yeah, let me pull, I think this will be a good way to look at it. So we've turned them, so here's on one side of the turn, you can see it, the grill's kind of tucked in, and there will be color match. But in other cases, they're always not facing you, but they're turned 90 degrees. And we found that is a good strategy. They just don't, they don't catch your eye.
So I'm getting some pressure up here.
Okay.
You want to, we have the 18th.
I'm probably like 70% through, so, I mean, that's.
questions and stuff. And we have the holiday tomorrow. Can you come back if we interrupt here? We're not gonna finish, obviously, I'm just worried about you.
Well, I can be available at the next meeting. I was hoping to try and get through everything, but that's, I'm at your discretion.
Place to break. We saw building one.
Okay.
We put a bookmark in it and come back.
Okay.
So, the 18th, Jack? So this matter will continue on April 18th at 7:30, no further notice is required.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question of Mr. Flannery or witness to be prepared to come back to explain why the affordable units are all one bedroom?
Yes. That's pursuant to a.
That's allowed under the, for
Okay,
55 and over.
I can address that now, or,
I understand that, I also understand the ordinance says that of the total units, 20% can be other than age-restricted. And it
Correct.
also says 1 or 2 bedrooms, except as required for affordable housing. So just be prepared to explain why that language seemingly is not being complied with. That's all.
okay.
And I say it has to
Certainly,
be.
I mean, we believe
So
it
be
complied.
prepared to
And we
explain.
want it briefed before the hearing.
I can provide.
So just this time with the microphone on, we're going to continue on April 17th, 18th, sorry, April 18th, 7:30, this room, no further notices required.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can we request an expedited transcript, seeing that
Can
we
we
do have-
request expedited transcripts so we can, for the
Certainly.
resolution purposes? Okay.
Make it the 17th,
Oh, but it's, yeah, that's about, oh, yeah.
If not earlier, I mean, I think we just need it before the hearing. All right, thank
No,
you.
not quite adjourned. Where are we with the expedited
I
transcript?
think we could, when you say expedited, Mr. Chairman,
Well, if we can get somebody,
we can get-
if we can get it here in a week, then the chairman can review it and
Right.
be able to vote. If you can't get a
Sure.
transcript for him to read.
yeah, we can do it in 8 days, yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, no problem, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we stand adjourned.